How do you answer a public insult carved into skin without shouting or breaking the law? What happens when a husband stays quiet, gathers proof, and lets a courtroom deliver the only answer that matters? Can dignity outlast a tattoo that tried to brand him forever? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Ilan, and I am 34 years old, a quiet man who keeps our home running and our daughter on time for school. I first saw the tattoo in the bathroom mirror when steam thinned and the letters settled into focus like a verdict I did not ask to read. She said it was a joke and art. I said I had work to finish before lunch. I placed 2 mugs on opposite counters and watched the gap between them become the shape of our week. I kept my voice even as a cropped photo pinged our phones and a laughing emoji slid under her post. I saved the time and the link, then closed the gallery and opened a blank spreadsheet because numbers hold still when people do not. A small reminder buzzed on my screen, downtown 3:40 p.m., and I swiped it away without comment. I folded a thin blanket on the guest bed and told myself it was only for naps. The printer breathed once in the hallway and fed out a blank page that I set aside like a promise to wait. She called it freedom. I called it a boundary I could not ignore. I reached for the dish rack and moved her cup to the back, then set mine by the sink so it could dry alone. I told myself it was practical, not symbolic, but the space between 2 mugs looked bigger than it should. She told me the tattoo came from a dare and from her right to live as she wanted. I said I had a meeting in an hour and needed quiet. The steam was gone now, and the letters were clear in my mind even when I did not look at her. I watched her scroll and smile at the first likes landing in real time. I opened my laptop and let a blank spreadsheet sit there until my breathing slowed. I typed the date, her post time, and a short note that said only mirror reveal, bathroom, early morning. I kept the language dry because dry words do not try to hurt you. She asked if I was angry, but she did not wait for the answer. She told me I had made her feel small for years by being predictable, and she thought it was brave to be honest about what she missed. I said I had to log a ticket for a broken printer downtown, and the calendar reminder for downtown 3:40 p.m. blinked on the screen like a small lighthouse I did not want to explain. I set my phone to vibrate, face down on the counter. I folded a towel. I looked at the guest bed and smoothed the blanket again, even though it did not need it. I went to work and sat under the air vent that always rattled. I breathed with the rattle until the cold felt normal and the screens looked like simple tools again. I logged into the ticket queue and closed 3 small problems, then watched the queue refill like a tide I could not see. My coworker walked by and asked if I had seen a post last night. I said I was not on my phone much. He nodded and said nothing else, which told me he had seen more than he wanted to admit. I kept my monitor angle tight and my shoulders loose. A ping from my personal account showed a cropped image with a caption about bold choices. I took a screenshot and stored it in a folder I named Archive A. I created a second folder called Archive B and left it empty on purpose. The office printer near the break room fed a blank page by mistake as the drum cycled, and I took it when nobody watched. I do not know why I took it. Maybe I wanted something physical that had not been printed on yet. I slipped it into my notebook and closed the cover as if I had done this before. At lunch, I walked outside and watched a city bus turn the corner. A man in a blue jacket held a door open for a stranger who did not say thank you. I liked that the man did it anyway. I thought about doing simple things quietly, without the wish for applause. I thought about Lena, her soft voice when she asked for a second story at night. The guest bed in the spare room had clean sheets now, and she had looked at it when she ran past it to her room. She did not ask about it. She did not have to. Children understand shape and distance faster than we think. I went back to my desk and answered a call about a password reset. The caller kept making small jokes to show he was not upset, and I let him do that because it helped him calm down. The day moved forward like a line on a graph that cannot see the future, only the current point. When I got home, the bathroom smelled like a salon, sharp and sweet at the same time. A new bottle sat near the sink with a clean label. She put it there like a trophy. She asked if I had anything to say about the comments. I said I would cook dinner. I cut onions with slow strokes and moved the pieces into a pan until the sound of heat became a steady note that blocked out the rest. She said her friends felt proud of her and thought I would not understand. I said I needed to keep the weekend open for errands and added salt to the pan. I did not ask about him. She mentioned his name in a casual way when she described the artist's style, and I let the words pass. The heat rose from the pan and made my eyes water, which was useful because it explained my eyes. I put a plate in front of her and another in front of the empty chair, then moved the second plate to the far end of the table so I could face the doorway. I ate slowly and watched the hallway. She laughed at something on her screen and shook her head as if the world was finally catching up to her truth. After dinner, I gathered the mail and spread it on the counter. I flipped the stack so that the envelopes face down, then lined them by size. A thin binder labeled Utilities sat near the fruit bowl. It was thicker than bills should have made it, but I did not open it. I pressed the edge with my palm and felt the slight lift under the plastic cover. In the bedroom, I made the guest bed as if I expected someone who was not me to sleep there. I took a photo of the wall planner in the hallway and zoomed on a red circle around a date 2 weeks away. I did not write the circle. I did not know who did. I kept it anyway. When she came in and looked at the guest bed, she asked if I was being dramatic. I said I did not want to wake her when I worked late. She called it boring. I accepted the word and kept the bed neat. Later, I put my phone on the dresser and taped a small USB drive under the edge of a folder that said taxes. I told myself I would not need it. I told myself that many times until the words felt empty and the action felt full. Night came like it always does, quiet at first and then louder when the city feels stronger. I opened my laptop and a cloud sync box popped up and said, "File uploaded successfully." I closed it without reading the file name. A message thread on my phone had a title that said, "Follow Up," and I muted it. I changed one contact name to a simple emoji and locked the screen with the side button. She stood in the doorway and asked if I was done sulking. I said I was updating a spreadsheet and then going to bed. She said I should be grateful she was honest now, and I said I had an early morning. I turned the lamp off and let the dark take the room while the hallway light stayed on, a thin bar across the floor like a line I could not step over yet. Door latch clicks. I heard the click and the faint chain move, and I watched the ceiling as the elevator groaned down the shaft. I woke to the soft light that only comes on Mondays when the neighbors' blinds are open. I made coffee and set her cup near the sink without looking at it. Lena came into the kitchen with a paper crown from her craft drawer and asked if we could take it to school for show and tell. I said yes and tucked the crown into her backpack with care. She asked if I would be at pickup, and I said I would try. I walked her to the door and tied her shoes while she balanced on my shoulder. She asked why Mommy was dressing in a rush, and I said we were running late for the bus. She nodded because that answer works for many things. I watched them go down the hallway and felt the air change when the door closed. I cleaned the counter and then sat at the table and wrote a list that said laundry, groceries, Lena's reading log, and a simple note that said keep calm. I kept the ribbon from the paper crown wrapper and put it in my pocket. I do not know why I did that. Maybe I wanted a small sign to hold in my hand when other signs were too loud. At work, my manager, Ms. Verity Hale, sent a message that said she wanted a quick word about online mentions. I knew what that meant. I said I could meet after lunch. The morning moved in blocks of tasks, each one a small island that I reached and left without trouble. A coworker slid a printout onto my desk face down and asked if I was okay. I said I was steady and that I would handle personal matters properly. The printout showed my face beside a line from a caption that did not help me, cropped and heavy with meaning that strangers enjoyed. I took a breath and slid the page into my notebook with the blank sheet from yesterday. The contrast felt important for a reason I could not name. I promised myself I would not raise my voice today. I promised myself I would not leave any sentences half-finished. After lunch, I sat in the HR room with a small plant and a soft chair that tried to help. Ms. Hale asked if I felt safe and if I wanted resources. I said I was documenting and that I was not in danger. She said the company preferred to keep work separate from personal drama and asked if I could limit public back and forth. I said I did not plan a show. She rested her hands on the table with her fingers interlaced and said she appreciated that. I kept my words brief, and I kept my breath slow. I thought about Lena's crown and put my hand in my pocket to touch the ribbon. It was still there. It helped more than I expected. I thanked Ms. Hale and returned to my desk. A colleague near the window whispered with another colleague and looked in my direction, then looked away when I looked up. I felt anger move through me and then leave because it had no place to settle. I reminded myself that silence can be practice, not surrender. In the evening, I took the long way home to avoid the busy corner where people gather after work. The sky held a warm color over the buildings, and I let it hold me too. I passed a small shop that does phone repairs and looked at a sign in the window about data recovery. I kept walking. I did not need services. I needed time. When I reached our building, the elevator stalled between floors for a second, then lifted me to our level with a low shake. I stepped into the hall and heard voices from inside our place. Laughter rolled out, sharp and bright. I unlocked the door and saw her dressed for a rooftop bar, hair back, eyes shining with the kind of happiness that wants witnesses. She said friends wanted to celebrate bold art, and that I should not act like a prison guard. I said I had some work emails to answer and would meet them later if I had time. She said I would not come because I feared crowds. I said I needed quiet right now. She rolled her eyes and sent a quick message to a group chat, thumbs moving fast. I followed at a distance an hour later, not to interfere, but to observe the shape of her world when it forgot me. The rooftop bar had a neon sign and a soft wind that made the string lights tremble. People held up phones and moved closer to her as if she gave off heat. Someone chanted for a toast to brave art. She raised her glass and lifted the edge of her shirt just enough for the text to be known without needing to be read in full. I did not step forward. I stood at the rail and looked down at the street where cars moved like slow fish in a bright stream. I let my phone record ambient sound from my pocket, only the crowd noise, only the rhythm of the night. A friend with a camera asked her to turn and pose, and she did. I saw a man at the far table lean back. It was Evan, the ex, with a calm smirk that belonged to someone who always finds a stool waiting. He looked at me once and then looked through me at the city lights. I thought about the blank page in my notebook. I thought about the difference between a page and a post. When the chanting faded, I went inside and stood near the service bar. The bartender cut limes and did not notice me. Ms. Hale's message from earlier sat on my phone, and I wrote a short line to confirm I had kept my evening quiet. Someone brushed my shoulder and said the view was better near the speakers. I moved away from the speaker because it burned my ear with a sharp sound. A group of friends called her name and told her to make a wish and blow out a sparkler that someone stuck into a cupcake. She laughed and did it. I watched the ashes drift and imagined they were small, weightless numbers falling into rows that could be sorted later. My phone vibrated in my pocket with an unknown caller at the same moment that a friend who worked at my office stepped beside me with his drink. He asked if we were good. I said I was steady. He nodded and went back to the table. I stayed until the wind turned cooler and the laughter became background. I left through the side exit and took the stairs down to the street. The city smelled like warm stone and fried food. A bus hissed and pulled closer to the curb. I stood by a lamppost and looked at the small scratches on its paint. I felt calm, which surprised me. I held that calm like a piece of glass that could break. I walked home and found the apartment quiet. The guest bed was neat, and the hall light was off, and the thin binder labeled Utilities still lifted the plastic cover a little at the edge. I placed the blank page from my notebook under the binder as if I were adding a small support beam to a weak shelf. I set 2 mugs on the counter again without thinking. I watched the space between them and then closed my eyes. Manager requests a quick word. I opened my eyes and saw the small red light on my office phone, blinking like a soft metronome, and I knew the next day would arrive with questions. I arrived at the community center hall with a plastic-wrapped gift for a friend's birthday and a small hope that the night would be kind. The room smelled like frosting and paper banners. A long table stretched across the middle with bright plates and a row of soda bottles lined like soldiers. Kira waved in my direction and then turned her back, which told me everything about her mood. I set the gift down and took a seat near the edge where a draft from the door kept the air cooler. Marla came in bright and loud, in a dress that moved when she laughed. She thanked people for coming and mentioned brave choices, and the group cheered. Evan stood near the wall with 2 cups, one for himself and one for her, and he looked at me once with a lazy kind of patience. I saw a small cluster of people push toward them as if news had arrived with the cake. I kept my hands on my knees and watched the candles flicker. I felt my own name brush the edge of their talk even when I could not hear the words. The toast began when someone tapped a spoon against a glass and called for a circle. Kira lifted her phone high, framing the crowd and Marla in the same rectangle. A guest said we should celebrate art that says what people think but are afraid to speak. Another guest laughed and said honesty hurts but also heals. I heard my daughter's laugh in my memory and kept my eyes on the banner where the tape peeled at one corner. Marla leaned toward Evan as he whispered something into her ear. She looked down at her ribs and then at the camera. My heart moved slowly, but did not race. I thought about air vents and spreadsheets and the way small acts build shape without sound. I reached into my pocket and felt a thin USB stick with today's date written on a piece of tape. I had labeled it that morning, not because I knew what would happen, but because I wanted one point on a line I could follow later. The cake arrived with sparkler candles, and the room light dimmed to help the phones. Someone counted down from 3 and called for a wish. Marla closed her eyes for the camera and then opened them as if the wish had already come true. Kira said the word proof in a cheerful voice and pointed her lens. Marla lifted the edge of her dress just enough to suggest the message under it. People gasped like an audience at a street show. Evan smiled and tilted his head. I looked at a reflection in the window beside them and watched the scene in reverse, which made it easier to stand in my place. I did not speak. I did not move forward. I recorded nothing but air and the sound of hands hitting tables. The candles hissed out, and smoke curled toward the ceiling. A man I barely knew came over with a plate and told me the cake was good. I said it looked well made. He said he admired courage, and I let that word pass between us without debate. Reuben arrived late and stood next to me with a paper napkin in his fingers. He asked in a low voice if I had eaten. I said I was fine. He said he did not like shows that make a daughter's father into a joke. I nodded once and kept my eyes on the banner. He told me he would step in if he had to, then stopped himself and rubbed the napkin small. I appreciated the instinct and also knew this was not his step to take. I told him I was steady. He looked at me again and seemed to believe it. When the music got louder, I slipped out a side door to the parking garage for air. The echo of footsteps layered under the song in my head. I walked down a lane with painted arrows and stopped where the concrete felt cooler. A hint of printer toner still seemed to cling to my jacket from a late night at the apartment, and I wondered if scent can be a map. Another set of steps slowed behind me and paused. I did not turn. I do not know who it was. The space between sound and body felt wide, then thinned, then widened again as the steps moved on. I took a breath and sent a file from my phone to Archive A with the time and location. A phone alarm labeled paper drop flashed and hummed on my screen, and I dismissed it without opening the note. I ran my thumb over the tape on the USB and put it back in my pocket. The next afternoon, I went to the park with Lena. The swings squeaked. A dog barked. She wore the paper crown from her craft drawer and told me it would keep the wind out of her hair. She climbed the slide and sat at the top and looked down at me. She asked why people laughed at me yesterday. I said grown-ups sometimes say things that are not true to feel strong. She asked if I felt strong. I said I felt steady. She nodded because steady made sense to her. She asked if Mommy liked her new picture. I said Mommy liked many pictures. She slid down and landed with a thump that shook a small cloud of dust. I cleaned her hands and told her we would make macaroni later. She said she wanted shapes, not elbows. I said I would try. She smiled and ran to the swings. I sat on the bench and wrote down the date and time on a small card, then put the card in my wallet. I touched the ribbon in my pocket from her crown wrapper, and it felt like a quiet bell. Kira posted a story while we were still at the park. The caption made a joke about truth inked in skin and boys who could not keep up. I screenshotted and put the image in a folder. I did not reply. A woman at the next bench looked at me, then at her phone, then away. I felt the look like a pebble thrown in a shallow pond. Ripples happen even when the rock is small. I zipped Lena's jacket and told her we would stop for milk on the way home. She said we needed cereal too because the plain kind tasted like paper. I laughed once and agreed. We left the park when the light began to bend. Camera flash. I turned as the flash cut across the playground and saw Kira near the fence with her phone lifted. She lowered it fast and pretended to tie her shoe. I picked up Lena and carried her to the sidewalk without a word. The flash stayed in my eyes like a tiny sun, and then it was gone. And then a text preview slid up on Marla's screen across the park and disappeared before she looked at it. By morning, the whispers had found new mouths. I went to the supermarket first because routines matter when the ground shifts. The carts clacked, and the aisles smelled like fruit spray and warm bread. At the checkout, the cashier scanned items and cleared her throat twice. A couple behind me watched their phone and then looked at me and then looked back at their phone. I placed milk, cereal, and macaroni shapes on the belt with care. The cashier told me the card reader might lag today and then smiled in a way that tried to help but carried pity in its pocket. I said it was fine. On the way out, a display of magazines featured a headline about truth and drama with stock images of couples. I kept walking and left the cart in the return slot without a squeal. At the office, I straightened my monitor so that it reflected only my face and not the windows behind me. A message thread from a colleague asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. The coffee came without small talk, which I liked. On my screen, a hashtag appeared beside a cropped image, and I watched it for a moment, the way you watch rain at the edge of a window frame. The drops form lines but do not ask you what you think. I took a screenshot and put it in Archive A with the time and the name of the site. I opened a browser tab and typed notary near me, then closed it before the results finished loading. I did not need the answers yet. I needed the outline of the question to stay clean. At lunch, I walked past the gym where Evan trains clients. The lobby smelled like rubber and cleaning spray. A poster on the notice board had a crown drawn in black marker next to a slogan about being better than yesterday. It felt like a shadow of a joke from the rooftop night. Evan laughed with a client by the glass doors. He saw me and nodded like a bartender who recognizes a regular but does not care why he is there. I did not go inside. I kept moving. The parking garage beneath the office held a slick puddle near a column, and I stepped over it without breaking stride. I thought about the thin binder labeled utilities on our counter and about the way its weight felt wrong. I thought about the USB taped under the taxes folder and about why small secrets sometimes need physical edges. In the late afternoon, my mother called, and I put on headphones and stood in the hallway where the sound did not echo. She asked if I was safe. I said I was steady. She asked if I needed her to come over. I said I had dinner covered and that she could visit later in the week. She told me she loved me and that I should keep notes when people tried to rewrite the past. I told her I understood. I kept my voice level so that she would not feel the spike in my chest. When we hung up, I wrote down the time of the call and the word hallway, then clicked the pen closed. A coworker walked by and asked if I had seen the new thread. I said I was focused on a ticket. He nodded and moved on with visible relief. Evening brought a thin wind that moved the balcony plants just enough to sound like paper. I stood outside while the apartment lights behind me stayed low. A cloud sync pop-up flickered on my laptop through the glass and said file uploaded successfully. I watched the message fade and then return once. The door behind me creaked, and I closed it enough to keep the night air in place. I set my phone on the table and renamed a contact with a single emoji so it would not glow like a flare when a message arrived. I opened a clean desktop folder called Archive B and dragged a small set of audio notes into it. No labels beyond dates. I took the thin binder labeled Utilities from the counter and held it in my hands, then set it down again without opening it. The plastic cover lifted at the corner where the material has stretched. It looked like a question I could not answer yet. When Marla came home, she tossed her bag on the chair and asked if I had enjoyed the day off from being serious. I said I had finished a long ticket and bought cereal that Lena would like. She laughed and said I always changed the topic to groceries when I felt weak. I said groceries feed us, and that seemed like a useful topic. She moved to the kitchen and started a video on her phone with the sound low. I saw a fast cut of the community hall and a flash that found my shoulder in the corner. She called it good content and said people loved real life. I thought about the word real and how it does not mean kind. I told her Lena had asked a question at the playground, and I had told her we were steady. She said I should teach Lena to be proud of brave art. I said I would teach her to be kind and honest. That was the end of that talk. I sat at my laptop to finalize a work report. As the cursor blinked, I heard Marla on a call in the hallway, voice quick, tone bright. She mentioned tomorrow and used the word fun like a promise. I minimized my screen out of habit when footsteps came near and the report went quiet in a gray bar. A new, unfamiliar key on my ring pressed against my palm as I shifted in the chair. I did not remember adding that key. I moved it to the back and let it sit there like a thought I would not finish tonight. My phone buzzed with a muted label that said, Meeting, Personal, for a recurring reminder, and I swiped it away without opening details. I placed 2 mugs on opposite counters and washed my hands slowly. The water was warm. The sound filled the small room and made it safe for a few seconds. Later, I flipped the mail stack and found an unsealed envelope in the outbox. I did not open it. I checked the wall planner and saw a date circled in red. The circle looked neat, like someone who did not rush. I took a photo and filed it. I moved the single USB from my pocket to a drawer and closed the drawer with care. The latch made a small click. I breathed in and out until the apartment sounds settled into their places. I told myself I would handle matters properly and that I would not speak that sentence louder than necessary. I told myself that choices carry weight even when they pretend to be light. Elevator bell. The bell sounded in the hallway as my manager stepped out of the car the next morning with a folded paper in her hand, and the paper stayed face down while she asked if I had a minute, and my laptop screen minimized again when I heard Marla tell someone on the phone that tomorrow would be fun. Morning came with a thin sun across the counter and dust that glittered in the beam like quiet noise. I put 2 mugs on opposite sides of the sink and washed a plate that did not need washing. The reminder on my phone blinked Meeting, Personal, and I swiped it away without opening the details. I opened my laptop, and the spreadsheet with initials and dates weighted like a patient map. I added 2 new notes, one for the community hall and one for the park, each with a time. I kept the words simple so they would not carry heat. A sticky note that said Bring Forms stayed under the lamp, and I left it there like a small flag that meant pause, not charge. In the hall, the wall planner held its red circle around a date that now sat close enough to feel. I stood there and counted the days with my eyes, then stopped counting because it did not matter anymore. Closeness was its own kind of answer. I made eggs for Lena and set the plate at the small table. She asked if we could bring the paper crown ribbon to school to show her friend. I said we could tie it to her backpack so it would not get lost. She nodded and touched the ribbon and then ate like hunger had rules she liked to follow. Marla moved through the kitchen with fast steps and a fast voice on her phone. She used the word brand and the word sponsor and the word exposure as if all 3 were spices for a meal she liked. I said there would be no more photos of Lena online without my clear yes. She called that controlling and told me to stop making more drama than the internet already made. I said I was calm and that I would handle matters properly. She laughed and said properly was a boring word. I said I would use it anyway. After drop-off, I took the thin binder labeled Utilities from the counter and slid a blank paper under the cover so it looked even thicker. I did not open it. I placed a single USB labeled with today's date near the keyboard and left it there in plain sight, then moved it to the drawer and clicked the lock when footsteps sounded in the hall. The click was soft and final. A muted phone on the table lit with the word private, and I let it ring and fade. A cloud sync box appeared on the screen and said file uploaded successfully, and I clicked the X because I did not want to see which line had moved where. I opened a new folder called Archive B if it did not already exist, and I placed a small audio file into it with the time in the name. I closed the lid and breathed until my shoulders lowered from my ears. At work, Ms. Hale passed my desk with a quiet look that asked if I needed time. I said I was steady. A colleague left a cup of coffee without a word. The office felt like a museum of small kindnesses that did not need plaques. I answered tickets, wrote notes, kept the tone polite and clear. At lunch, I took the stairs to the roof, not the elevator, because the air felt truer up there. I stood by the edge and looked at the city and thought about lines. The line between image and harm, the line between patience and surrender, the line between warning and the act that must follow. I told myself I would keep my promise to handle matters properly, and that words must become a shape with weight when the hour arrives. I did not know yet what the hour would look like. I only knew it would not hide. When I picked up Lena from school, she asked if we could walk the long way past the trees. I said yes. She showed me a sticker on her hand that said excellent helper, and I told her I agreed with the sticker. She asked if we were going to the park tomorrow. I said maybe. She asked if Mommy would come. I said I did not know. She looked at the ground the way children do when they check their steps. We passed a bus stop where a poster showed a woman smiling at a phone. The picture made my skin feel cold even in the sun. Lena asked if we could make pancakes for dinner. I said we could make them on the small pan, the one that never burns the first one. She cheered and ran ahead a few steps and then stopped to wait for me. I wanted to hold her hand longer than the block allowed. At home, I lined up the mail again and left an unsealed envelope in the outbox like a quiet rehearsal. I took a photograph of the wall planner and saved it, then opened my laptop and minimized the window when I heard the lock turn. The thin binder lifted at the corner like a slow breath. I placed 2 mugs on opposite counters again and thought about how a room learns new positions the same way a body learns new habits, one quiet day at a time. Marla came in and said she had a meeting tomorrow in a tall building downtown. She said it would be a big step in her personal brand and that people finally understood her. I said Lena would be with me after school and that dinner would be ready by 7. She nodded with a face that softens nothing. She asked if I would come to the lobby to pick up a package after her meeting. I said I might pass by. She smiled in a way that meant she thought the story was hers to write. The evening stretched in thin lines of tasks. I washed the pan and set it upside down to dry. I helped Lena with a worksheet about shapes. We talked about squares and circles and triangles and how corners feel sharp or safe. And she said a square feels like a hug if it holds a window. I told her I liked that thought and wrote it down for myself. After she fell asleep, I sat on the balcony and listened to the plants rustle as if they were whispering notes to each other. A cloud sync alert blinked again. I let it blink and fade. My phone alarm, labeled paper drop, hummed a soft tone, and I turned it off before it could repeat. I opened the junk drawer and pressed my thumb to the USB taped under the taxes folder to make sure it still held. I closed the drawer when the hallway light shifted under the door. I did not sleep right away. I let the dark draw its map, and then I folded that map and placed it in a pocket I could find in the morning. Morning arrived with a dry throat and a clear list. I moved through the list as if each item were a rung on a ladder. I left Lena at school with a hug and told her the paper crown ribbon would be there at pickup, and she squeezed my hand like a promise I had to keep. I walked downtown and past the office tower where the lobby doors turned slow. I saw the security desk and the open space where people wait and watch. I kept walking. I circled the block. I checked the time on my phone. Meeting. Personal blinked, and I swiped it away and lifted my head to the light the glass made on the sidewalk. I set my face to neutral and felt the line inside me set too. When I reached our apartment again, I locked the desk drawer, turned the key once, and put it in my pocket. I said aloud that I would handle matters properly. My voice sounded steady enough to trust. Footsteps paused outside the door. The steps stopped, waited as if listening, then moved on, and the printer in the hall spooled once and stayed empty, and the room felt like the second before a chime. Noon shook out across the city like a sheet, and the office tower lobby filled with the soft noise of shoes and phones and the guard's radio. I stood near the security desk where the floor made a small echo. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and wool coats. A clock over the directory marked the hour with a single clear sound. Kira arrived first, fast and bright, phone in hand, eyes already angled for a story. She looked at me and lifted her chin as if we were moving pieces on her board. Evan came next from the street, steps lazy, face calm, the kind of calm that likes an audience. Marla came through the revolving door with her mouth already set for a victory laugh. She wore a jacket that held its own shape even when she moved. She saw me and tilted her head and asked with her eyes if I came to watch her win. I stood with my hands at my sides and my shoulders square. I did not step forward, and I did not step back. A licensed server I had never met before approached with a folded packet and a sentence that the law requires. The voice was even. The words were clear. The document titles were visible enough to be known, not displayed like trophies. The server confirmed her name and placed the packet in her hands, while the directory board reflected the scene in small squares of light. Kira lifted her phone and then hesitated because the scene did not fit the caption she had in mind. Evan slid back a step as if a gust had found him near the door. The guard watched with a professional stillness that felt like respect. I did not speak. I did not nod. I did not gloat. I let the process make its sound. The server summarized the immediate effect in simple words, the way procedure turns breath into shape. Temporary orders set a possession and conduct schedule in the home so that common areas stay peaceful. A clause set clear rules about posting Lena's image without both parents' consent and about taunts that create harm. A first status date was noted. The summary did not need theater, it needed space to land. It landed. Kira lowered her phone because the moment did not want a soundtrack. Evan looked at the floor where the light from the glass made a patch of white like a small pond. Marla held the packet and stared at it the same way a person looks at a sign on a road they thought they knew well. I felt my chest loosen the way a knot loosens when a thread finally slides free. I kept my face quiet. I let my breath leave slowly. The lobby sound came back the way a room returns after a pause. Somewhere, a printer behind the security desk fed a page, this time with ink, not blank. People walked through the revolving doors without knowing what had changed 6 feet away. Reuben stepped in from the sidewalk and stopped when he saw us. He looked at me first, then at Marla, then at the packet. He did not speak. He gave me one small nod that meant he had heard every quiet sentence I had not said. Tamsin stood behind him by the glass, hands tight on her purse strap, eyes bright but steady. She did not move closer. She did not need to. Presence is its own language. Kira tried to say that this was cruel, that I had made a private matter into a show, but the lobby swallowed her tone and sent it back to her without an echo. Evan cleared his throat, as if about to suggest a joke, but then found nothing to say. Marla's mouth opened and then closed. She looked at me like a person who has learned that a door they thought they locked opens from the other side. I did not speak to her. She held the packet and knew that it did not ask for permission to exist. It existed because a boundary broken in daylight must be answered in daylight. The guard, who had said nothing, looked at me with a small shift of the eyes that felt like a hand on a shoulder, then looked away because his post needed him to be a wall. The server confirmed that service was complete. The clock over the directory marked another minute with a single clear sound. I stood with my hands open and empty and felt the space around me change temperature. The process had finished the part that belonged to this place. It had no need for anyone's approval now. It moved forward on rails that do not care about captions or jokes or rooftop toasts. I turned a little to the side and saw the reflection of us in the glass. 4 figures, 1 desk, a packet, a clock. I thought of the blank page in my notebook and the page the printer had made behind the desk and how both were paper but not the same. I thought of Lena's ribbon tied to her backpack and how a small loop holds fast when you pull it clean. I did not think about winning. I thought about steadiness. I thought about dinner at 7. I thought about the rule to be kind and honest and to use the word properly even when someone calls it boring. I stood with that word and let it stand with me. Kira lowered her phone and looked at the lights in the ceiling for a long second as if they might give her a caption. Evan adjusted his sleeve and then checked the street outside for a car that was not there. Marla held the packet the way a person holds a mirror they did not plan to see. She said my name without sound. It hung in the air and then dropped with no place to rest. The front doors turned. People entered, people left. The city continued with full lungs. The server stepped away. The guard's radio clicked. The directory screen rolled another list of tenants. A lobby announcement chime rose and settled from the speaker above us, clean and plain. I felt the sound pass through me and land on the floor. I took 1 step back to make room for others moving through the space. I kept my eyes level and my mouth closed. I did not look at Kira's screen. I did not look at Evan's face. I looked at the curve of the revolving doors as they carried their quiet loads of strangers. Marla shifted her weight and gripped the packet tighter. She looked toward the doors, then back at me, then at the guard, and then at the doors again. She made a small move as if to speak, then did not. Lobby announcement chime at noon. The doors turned. A rush of air brushed my sleeve. Her mouth opened once more and found no words. The packet did not change. The day held its shape. The doors rotated behind her. Cut. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.